Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the All-America City Promising Practices webinar with a focus on the power of libraries to foster inclusive civic engagement. I'm Sarah Lipscomb, and I'm the Director of the All-America City Award Program and Community Assistance here at the National Civic League. I'm also joined by my colleague, Carla Kimbrough, who's the Racial Equity Program Director here at the National Civic League. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. The National Civic League, just a little background, we are a 123-year-old nonprofit that aims to advance civic engagement to create equitable, thriving communities. And we started this webinar series about a year ago, and we feature All-America City winners and finalists as well as national groups to really help equip individuals, institutions, and local government with some models, insights, and ideas that we hope can further equity in your community. And very briefly, I wanted to touch on the 2018 All-America City Awards before we move into our presenters today. The 2018 All-America City Awards is focused on promoting equity through inclusive civic engagement, and the application is now available for download. As you can see here, we have 5 criteria, and civic engagement is the most important. Then we have inclusiveness and equity, collaboration, innovation, impact, and future planning and visioning. If you have not considered applying for the All-America City Award, right now is definitely a good time to get started. There is a written application which consists of 5 parts, as you can see on the screen here. And it starts with equitable opportunities in your community, a little background on your community story and history, outlining what civic engagement looks like in your community, and then finally the bulk of the application is 3 community-driven projects that really demonstrate those 5 criteria from the previous slides. And you'll hear from our second presenter today in Roanoke, Virginia, a little bit more about the All-America City Award and how it helps communities. And the dates, just for you all to keep in mind, the written application is due February 28th, so still plenty of time. If you guys haven't considered applying yet, then we'll announce the finalists in April, and we invite the finalists to come and present in June to a peer learning conference and award ceremony in Denver, Colorado. So with that, I want to go ahead and get to the bulk of our presentation, and I want to introduce Chris Becker, who is a senior consultant with the Urban Libraries Council. Chris?
Thank you very much, Sarah. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm very happy to be here with you today representing the Urban Libraries Council in general and Susan Benton, who is the President and CEO of the Urban Libraries Council, and unfortunately she could not be here today. But we're honored to be included in this webinar, and what my plan is to talk a little bit about the work of the Urban Libraries Council on inclusive civic engagement, and then highlight a few examples of the great work of public libraries in creating inclusive environments where democracy happens. And it's interesting in listening to Sarah, the mission of the Urban Libraries Council really parallels the National Civic League in many ways, except we focus on inspiring libraries to transform communities through a variety of programs and services. And let me just tell you a little bit about the Urban Libraries Council for those of you who aren't familiar with us. It's a membership association, was established in 1971, an association of leading public library systems in the United States and Canada. Most of the members are from urban centers and from around the urban centers, although we have a pretty wide range of member libraries, as the examples will show. We serve as the voice for public libraries and the force that inspires them to evolve through the activities and ideas that they share together. And it's a forum for library leadership that produces innovative ideas and best practices that ensure community impact. And I will admit, most of my career was focused on working with local governments. I worked at the National League of Cities for a very long time, and I was not that connected to public libraries. So it's been really inspiring to learn personally about the exciting work that goes on in libraries today, which is very different than what many of us may remember from when we were growing up. So let me tell you a little bit about the Urban Libraries Council and civic engagement. It has been, civic engagement is an essential component of what libraries do. It's kind of why they exist. But a lot of our work over the past 5 to 7 years has really focused on how to make that more of an explicit commitment than an implicit fact of what a library is. In fact, our first publication on civic engagement came out in 2011, and that was called Stepping Up to the Civic Engagement Challenge, and was basically arguing that libraries needed to become more extroverted leaders and focus more on working outside the library in order to carry out their role as civic leaders. We were honored in 2012 to work with the National Civic League to produce a special issue of the National Civic League that focused on public libraries and civic engagement that came out in the winter of 2012. If you have access to that, I encourage you to read it. I was telling Sarah that I admit I worked on it but had not looked at it in several years. And there's some really great articles in there that describe kind of the essence of civic engagement from the perspective of local leaders and library leaders. And we also have some articles from several of the major foundations. So it's a really interesting perspective that is still very relevant today. More recently, ULC put out a new leadership brief on libraries leading civic engagement. That came out in the fall of 2017. And then we have 2 other initiatives that are very focused on civic engagement called Libraries Stand Tall and Life of Liberty Libraries. Libraries Stand Tall is the process of collecting messages and program information about how libraries are contributing to and supporting a strong democracy. And it's very self-developed in 4 categories: civil society, inclusion and tolerance, civic engagement, and tenets of democracy. And if you go to the Urban Libraries Council website at urbanlibraries.org, you can see the ongoing evergreen list of what libraries are contributing to how they stand tall in their communities and contributing to supporting a strong democracy. Life, Liberty, and Libraries is a social media campaign to showcase the work and value of public libraries, and it kind of grew out of a sense of needing to raise the profile of libraries during these fractious political times. And the campaign has reached about 2.8 million people on social media. And then in October, our 2018 annual forum focused on leading in a democracy. And the last question we asked at the end of that 2-day conference, we were using online polling technology throughout the conference. And so we asked the participants to write down 3 words that describe kind of the essence of libraries leading in a democracy. I know this word cloud is a little hard to read. You can probably look at it more closely when you get a copy of the PowerPoint. But you can see there are 4 words that actually really stand out, which were mentioned most frequently by the participants. And the biggest one is equity, community, inclusion, and empowerment. And they really reflect kind of the direction and the thinking of libraries today around this role of civic engagement, inclusive civic engagement, and also race and social equity. So let me tell you a little bit about what we've learned about libraries and civic engagement, their role as leaders and powerful partners, and as hubs for community dialogue and activity. First thing is that when libraries are engaged in civic engagement, it encourages people to contribute to their communities in meaningful, productive, and sustained ways. And I want to put the emphasis on sustained. This isn't about an event here and there. It's about how libraries create the framework and the environment that make civic engagement part of the fabric of people's lives so that they see that they have a place. And in that sense, it creates an environment in which everyone has a voice, a role, and a valued place in their communities. And that's driven very much by what a welcoming place libraries are. They're non-threatening, and it reaches a lot of people. The work of libraries on civic engagement is also building capacity to take on challenging issues, heal community wounds, and embrace community change. And interestingly and probably sadly, the heal community wounds has become a recurring role. And there's a great article in the Civic League, National Civic Review on public libraries and civic engagement, written by George Skip Noe, who's the city manager of Aurora, Colorado. And he talked about the role that the library played after the July 2012 shooting in a movie theater in Aurora, and that embracing, healing role that the library was able to play. And after disasters and things, the library is a really coming together place. And lastly, the work of the library is strengthening democracy and building strong communities around civic engagement. The next slide just shows a quote that I heard in one of my many interviews with library directors. This is from Matt Poland, who is the former CEO of the Hartford Public Library, which has been a library that's really been on the forefront of libraries and civic engagement, and particularly libraries working to engage immigrants in the community. And what Matt said, and I think to me this just says a lot about what all my many slides will say, is that people view their public library as this democratic place where opinions are heard, resources are universally available, everyone is welcome, and programs are offered about things that matter in the community. And Hartford was one of the first public libraries to create a position on civic engagement who was a community outreach person. It's now become a very common role in public libraries, but his role was to go out in the community and just connect on a regular basis and sort of be the arm of the library outside the library doors. One last point I want to make before moving on is on ULC's work on race and social equity in over the past few months. This came out of, and as Sarah had said, race and social equity is a logical extension of and component of civic engagement. And this is a statement, I won't read it, and again, it's hard for you to read, but it's a statement that came out of the work of a group of library leaders who met together to talk about library roles in race and social equity. And they crafted this statement. It was a bit of group wordsmithing after a while, but the statement defines what the leaders of North America's public libraries are committed to in achieving race and social equity. And the statement actually has been embraced and endorsed by 129 of ULC's 147 members. And by endorsing it, they're saying that this statement aligns with what the library values, and this statement reflects what the library is willing to do in the community, and it states pretty much how the library intends to model race and social equity, both in the work that they do in the public library and in how they operate in the community. And I think it's a very powerful statement about the important role that libraries can play on race and social equity as part of their work on inclusive civic engagement. I now want to just talk briefly about 5 leadership roles that have emerged over our work of talking with public library directors and looking at the kind of work that they're doing. And I think these roles define why the public library, regardless of organizational structure, whether it is or isn't part of government, doesn't really matter, but why the public library can be such a powerful leader and powerful partner in your work on civic engagement. The first role is as a civic educator, which really plays to the library's strengths around lifelong learning. And as a civic educator, libraries can increase awareness of, knowledge, and skills and motivation to become civically engaged. In order to have a meaningful role in any way, you need to be well informed, and libraries have really embraced that civic educator role. The second role, conversation starter, has actually emerged as an even more significant role recently, particularly around tough conversations, around community healing. And this is the library's role in bringing issues forward in a safe and unbiased place where all opinions are valued and heard. And it's more than just being a convener and more than hosting events. It's defining the topics and facilitating the conversations in ways that people feel strengthened and enhanced when they leave the meeting, and that there's some movement forward. The third critical role is as a community bridge, which involves connecting people with each other, with opportunities, with services, with their community, and with their government. I think particularly with their government, one of the things that we found for immigrants, City Hall can be kind of an intimidating place, and when libraries create the connections to the other resources around the community, it often gets people connected in ways that they might not otherwise get connected. The other thing is, despite the powerful technology resources that libraries have, they also still provide many opportunities for face-to-face connections, which I think are important. I actually heard an interesting conversation this morning on NPR, which was a conversation about whether teens are addicted to their cell phones. And it was talking about actually how kids sometimes experience withdrawal, adults too, when they don't have their cell phones. Libraries, as community bridges, can play that role that connects people beyond their cell phones and beyond social media in face-to-face opportunities. The fourth critical role is visionary, which is leading efforts to broaden perspectives and, again, broaden the range of topics that are covered. In some cases, this has been about leading formal community visioning processes, but it's more than that. It's being that place where there's a safe opportunity to look to your community future and to look beyond what's right in front of you and to see more than the obvious and to be willing to address that, again, in a safe place. And the last one is Center for Democracy in Action, and that involves walking, talking, thinking, and acting as the place where democracy happens, and so that it becomes not just a way of thinking, but an action place for democracy. Now with that, I'm going to move on and highlight a few examples of libraries leading the way that just tries to show the range of things that are happening around these 5 leadership roles. The first one is from the Lexington Public Library. Some of these are also libraries that won innovation awards through Urban Libraries Council for their progressive work on these topics. Lexington Public Library on the Table engaged more than 11,000 residents in a day of community conversations to put their ideas and concerns about the city's future on the table. And it was part of getting community input on the city's comprehensive plan. But it was far more than that, because what it did was made civic engagement simple, enjoyable, and accessible to all. So there wasn't just one place where you had to go to put your ideas in. There were conversations that happened all over the community, so that it was convenient and easy and non-intimidating to be an active player in the city's comprehensive plan, and it increased participation in the development of that plan by more than 200%. There were probably people who participated that started out by not even knowing what the comprehensive plan was and felt that they had an opportunity to say something about it. The next example focuses on that issue of teens and how the library plays a critical role in engaging teens in face-to-face ways. And I juxtaposed 2 vastly different library systems. Queens Public Library is one of 3 library systems that serves the city of New York. It serves a population of 2.3 million people and has 62 locations. And Skokie Public Library in Skokie, Illinois, serves a population of 64,000 and has 1 primary library facility. It has bookmobiles and considerable outreach, but it's 1 library. And both of them have very interesting programs for specifically focusing on engaging teens in meaningful ways. The Queens Library Youth to Youth Leadership Council provides a way for teens to discover their voices, explore social and cultural differences, and create community change. And Skokie Public Library Neutral Zone similarly engages teens from different backgrounds in weekly talking circles to share feelings, learn how others cope with challenges, and celebrate successes. And there's a couple of features of both of these programs that I think are really exciting. One is they both include skill building as part of the conversation, so you learn how to have productive conversations when you're dealing with issues, how to listen, how to share ideas, and also that they engage kids that otherwise wouldn't know each other. I mean, maybe in Skokie they might, just because it's a much smaller community, but they consciously drew people from different circles of the community so that they were working with kids that weren't the regular group that they hang out with, and provided a way to broaden their perspective over time. The next one, Richland Public Library in Richland, South Carolina. This is, they created a social awareness task force, and it really focuses on the conversation starter role, where they create opportunities for civic engagement and community connections and courageous conversations. And they have a variety of activities, small circles of dialogue using trained moderators. Staff of the public library, the team was trained in skilled moderation around difficult issues, and they've had what they call Let's Talk sessions on topics such as race, social justice, women's rights, and more. And I think the interesting thing that has come out of these Let's Talk conversations, which are around tough issues that you normally don't sit around and talk about with a diverse group of people that you don't know, as opposed to just among friends. The number one question that they get at the end of the Let's Talk sessions is, when are we going to do this again? So that there's a sense of, I had a good conversation and I want to be there again, which to me is really symbolic of the success of these efforts. The next one, St. Paul Public Library, focuses on racial equity, and St. Paul Public Library and St. Paul in general has been a real leader on this topic. This was part of a citywide initiative to eliminate racial barriers throughout the city. In the library in particular, they focused on creating a more diverse workforce that was more representative of the changing makeup of St. Paul, whose demographics have been changing significantly. They also focused on changing library practices, policies, and programs to ensure equal access and eliminate unplanned barriers. For example, they offer story times in 8 languages now. Another thing that they found was that requiring participants to have library cards in order to use the computers was creating an obstacle for people of color who were less likely to have library cards. So they eliminated that barrier and not only created the opportunity to use the computers among those who sometimes had a great need, but then they also introduced people to the library so that they were willing and ready to get a library card because they saw the benefits of it. And lastly, they integrated racial equity into routine and awareness in daily operation through training in the library, and also offered training on community awareness for the public to make it a more regular way of operating rather than something you have to go back and think about, that proactively it is the way they do business in the St. Paul Public Library. And one last example, I know I'm racing through these, but I just wanted to give you some highlights of the range of what's happening. This is Baltimore County Public Library, which established Be an Instrument of Democracy as a library strategy. So they were saying, we want to make this an explicit action, not just descriptive of who we are, but also what we do. And some of the things they've done is they convened community justice forums following the racial violence in the city in 2015 and played that conversation starter and community bridge role. They hosted a Voices of Government series around the 2016 presidential elections to create opportunities to become informed and to talk about the upcoming election. And they're launching the Voices of Our Community series to build common ground among different religions and cultures. And let me just wrap up with 2 additional slides. The next one, we talked about at our annual forum earlier this year. One of our speakers was Eric Liu, and he's CEO of Citizen University. There's an error on my part there. It's not Civic University, it's Citizen University. And he talked about the important transition from civic engagement to civic empowerment, which focuses on how people can be active in their democracy and exercise power by using their voice in productive ways. And some examples of the way he suggested and libraries can help change that and move more toward empowerment is by shifting the mindset from serving people to empowering people, and by shifting people thinking from being outsiders to being insiders, and from being observers to active players. And I think that's an important thing that a library can do because of their role in the community. And also to invite the underserved, the uninvited into power, knowledge, and capital. And that can start in a non-threatening place like the library. Let me wrap up with just a few quotes. I started my career out as a newspaper reporter covering local government, so all these years later I listen in quotes, so I hear things that people say and capture them for future use. And these are some quotes that I've captured recently that explain why libraries are such powerful players in the civic engagement space. And first, they're welcoming places where everybody is somebody. I'll just say them and then you can think about them. The next one was said by somebody who spoke at our conference and talked about being at a place in her life where she kind of was at loose ends and didn't have any place to go, and then she found the library, which she said is a place where you don't have to buy anything, bring anything, or believe anything to come in. And also that we've talked about libraries as an essential engine of democratic practice where democracy happens and their activities offer so that people become more aware of what it means to live and operate in a democracy. And they can become civic power stations as we go forward to focus on moving from civic engagement to civic empowerment. With that, I just want to thank you for listening and say that you please feel free to contact me or Susan Benton. I think the next slide has our contact information, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at the end of this webinar. So thank you very much.
Chris, thank you so much for your presentation. We really appreciate it. And as Chris said, we're going to wait and hold questions till the end, just so we can make sure we get through the next presentation. And if you do have questions, feel free to go ahead and start typing them into the chat and send a private message to the host, and I will field those for the end of the webinar. So thank you again, Chris, and with that, I would like to hand it over to Sheila Umberger, who is the Director of Libraries in Roanoke, Virginia, a 7-time All-America City winner. So thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm very happy to be here today to talk with you more about how Roanoke Public Libraries in Roanoke, Virginia is engaging our citizens. I am the lead on the local Campaign for Grade Level Reading project, which we call Star City Reads. And I believe that our All-America City wins in both 2012 for our plan to improve reading in Roanoke and in June of this year for our win in June of this year for our results are directly tied to the community collaboration that we've been able to grow. So I would tie back to what we just heard about libraries, and what I'm going to do is kind of dive even more local and give some ideas about how we've used this particular project to create the community collaboration in our community with the library as literally the lead. But first, I want to just give a snapshot of Roanoke. Roanoke is a city in southwest Virginia with a population of almost 100,000, the urban core nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains within a dynamic region of around 300,000. Roanoke is a city of neighborhoods, and as I go along, knowing this is very important if you want to be successful in Roanoke. A third of our children live in poverty. 30% of Roanoke's third graders do not read proficiently, and 16% of our adults did not complete high school. Yet we are a city with a thriving, vibrant, and dynamic downtown area, with a strong economy, a strong school system, and we are diverse. We are a refugee resettlement center, and we have new businesses moving in and young families and young professionals. Within our borders, we have an accredited medical school and 3 colleges. So let's talk about civic engagements in libraries. There are 3 things that I think contribute to successful civic engagement that have helped shape our work that I want you to think about today. They are be at the table, work together on a common goal, and create a community space. So I hope you're not distracted by this one. We are with the biscuits that are showing here. The first one is literally be at the table. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is trust and relationships. And to be a player, you have to know the players in your community. Every community has a special place or activity. What is yours? In Roanoke, one of these places is the Roanoke restaurant. It's been here for decades. So in any morning, you can find players in Roanoke at the table literally talking about collaboration, building trust, and working things out. So an example I'll give for you, in the campaign for grade level reading, I've heard numerous people say, how do you have a relationship with your school system? How do you have a relationship with this other group? Well, we literally have breakfast together at the Roanoker, and over time, we have built the relationship. We're able to talk about things privately, and then when we're in a place, we understand each other's issues and can work together, and the library is a very good place for that, a neutral place for a lot of people. I'll also talk about activities when you're at the table. So we go to community meetings. We have branch managers that actually go to our team's football games and meet their parents. We do the National Night Out. We have local festivals. So we are present and share a table with other nonprofits. We do joint programs and promote it together, and all this leads to building trust and relationships. Next slide, please. Okay, so Unconventional Partners. What we have discovered is that it's easy for libraries to kind of get in a rut, and I'll speak affectionately because I've been a librarian for a long time, and work with who you feel comfortable with. I say to be a true community collaborator and to be a person that is viewed as a player at the table, you need to reach out to people that might not be considered your normal collaborative partners. So, for example, it's very easy for us to work with preschool, Head Start, schools, but we have had very high success with programs with our Roanoke Symphony. In fact, our symphony director actually came to Denver and did our TED Talk about the use of music in schools and the music and literacy. So we have a very strong relationship with them and programs that we sponsor and work together. We also have worked with Mill Mountain Theater and the Roanoke Children's Theater to literally bring books to life for children. So we went into a school, we had Kiwanis Club buy books for 300 children, Stuart Little, and then the Roanoke Children's Theater actually brought that play to life. And so you can see the collaboration of 3 partners on that project. We also have a very strong relationship with our Roanoke Police Department. They are part of our readers and our housing authority. And we have, I'll talk in a little bit about a festival that we did as an example in a minute, and they played a high role in that festival. I put barbershop on here because we are working with our mayor, and I know that there's been some work with this nationally, but we actually met with a group of barbers and small business owners recently, myself, the police chief, and our head of social services with our mayor. And we met with about 50 people. And what we're going to do is we're starting a collaborative project with them where we will actually take books into the barbershop. Our social services will take information there. We're trying to allow people to have a place that we can collaborate with them. We also talked to them about small business practice and ways that the library can support that. So that is a future project that our mayor is very excited about, and we are too, because it's, again, non-traditional but it's connecting with the grassroots in our community. I want to give the example of our most recent thing about this on our next slide, and that is we did a Star City Reads Books on Wheels Fall Festival. And several things have, by being part of the campaign for grade level reading, it has been a huge support to us, and this is an example of that. Because we're in All-America City, we were able with our liaison to talk about how one of our goals is to distribute books to our children. So since 2012, and because of the support from this program, we've distributed 100,000 books to children in Roanoke through our 28 partners. This particular festival happened in October, and we received 40,000 books from First Books, and they came literally on a truck, and we unloaded them. And within 1 week, we gave away 40,000 books to our partners, our 28 partners, and to 9,000 citizens here in Roanoke. Again, this would not have been possible without the campaign's support and connection back to First Books for us. But key points that I would want to point out about the collaboration and the community involvement. We had 150 volunteers from all different walks of life helping us sort the books. So we had very much bonding experience doing that. Our partners had access to citizens on the day of our festival, and when they did that, they were able to see that the library could bring together a group of community partners and citizens that would hear about their services, and so that also strengthened our partnership. This particular festival, weirdly, is in a space at Goodwill. However, the part that I wanted to point out is it's our next library renovation project. And guess what? We've already had a big community program in a space that will be our library but is not yet. So collaboration, trust, and bonding, and a sense of purpose for the good of the community are what we always think about when we plan these things. So that would lead me to thought number 2 that I want us to think about, and that is when we work together on a common goal, in this particular case, Star City Reads, and also collaborative programs. So when you already have, for example, with this, a lot of people in a community doing a lot of good for children, or substitute whatever you would want to work on, working together makes your community's accomplishments even stronger, and you have a greater civic impact. As mentioned earlier, libraries can be that community bridge to connect on a common goal and project. In this case, the City of Roanoke has a collaboration of community leaders from businesses, schools, nonprofits, and citizens who are working together to ensure that our goals in the reading campaign are accomplished. We have grown our coalition from 6 in 2012 to 28. So in a community of 100,000 people with an urban center, this is most of the players at the table. We share data. We have quarterly learning, networking opportunities. And I knew we were on the right track when I overheard one Star City Reads partner say, "I did not realize you did this. Why is my organization doing this when you do it so much better? We will shift resources and do something else to support all of our work." That was the most wonderful conversation I ever heard at one of our networking breakfasts. Another thing we do is we share data. So we're very data-driven. So in our particular case, I would ask a question. Do you have a community college, a normal college, a medical school where you could get to know someone who has resources on data? And what we do is we use the data to start these community conversations. And we ask questions about why we're doing certain things. Are we looking at the right place that has the need? In this place, we drill down and look at scores, reading scores, that sort of thing. But you could use this on many things. We use this to help us plan our progress and where we need to connect in our community. It's also helped us identify partners that we did not have at the table. One of our most recent partners, we're working on some health initiatives with our community. So I would highly recommend that if you don't have this in your campaign or in a project, that this is a very useful partner in your community. I also want to give a few short examples of some of our collaborative programs similar to what was talked about before. There are 3 programs I wanted to talk about. One is Feed and Read. In this particular program, we started with our summer reading program and the YMCA. We started this in 2015 as a pilot. In the first year, we served around 4,000 meals. that summer. But since 2015, our program has fed over 17,000 children. Then we listened to our community. In October, we started a pilot with a new organization to Roanoke, Feeding America, at one of our branches that's the most economically challenged. Children were telling us that they were hungry, and so this first month we have fed over 1,100 meals at that small community branch. A food truck on Monday evening and super snacks Monday through Saturday. We always tie the part about read, we tie stuff in the library to that. So we tie programs, books, we bring in community partners to work with children. We've had people with dental, talk about dental health. We've had people talk about careers with our teens. This is a really good place for people to come together and feel like, again, that neutral, safe place. Okay, the other one is our Roanoke Baby Board Book. So we developed and published a baby book with the help of the campaign. We saw that Baltimore has a beautiful counting book, and we really liked it. So the campaign connected us with Duo Press, and we found a local entrepreneur foundation called Life Ring Foundation that's unique to Roanoke. And then we connected with another group called Turn the Page. It's a group of young entrepreneurial women here in Roanoke who want to work with birth to age 2. And so between those two organizations, we've been able to fund and gain entry into the hospital. And so every child that's born in Roanoke receives this book, along with information about reading and the library. I've actually had parents tell me that they want to give this book to their children for graduation because we have captured Roanoke in this book. And physically with this book, we are saying as a community that we care about reading and education. Also, we did another program with our Valley Metro bus system, and we call it Books on Buses. We distributed on the routes. We actually rode on the routes. The best route was to Krispy Kreme donuts, but that's just a side. But we actually literally got on the bus with our partners and rode the family ones to observe like what we were seeing on the buses. Since 2015, we've distributed, we started out the first year with 2,000 books, but since 2015, we've distributed 88,400 books to our community. The books are on the bus, and people can get them, and they can read them on the bus, or they can take them with them. Again, one of the things that we've liked about this is connecting with the bus drivers and with the community, because what the community is telling us is we've had older people on the bus that maybe know their neighbor. They ride the same bus. They will go and help a young parent read to their child or talk to them, and it's just been a really good program. Lastly, Vroom is also, we were connected with this through the campaign for grade level reading. Vroom is a new initiative for us. Basically, it's an app that allows parents to enter key data about their child's age, and they receive pointers to their phone on how to interact each day to make learning fun and to give them everyday tips. We decided to take it a step further, and we have talked to our head of social services, and we're going to be piloting that with social services. And I guess you may be hearing me say piloting. That's another thing that libraries can do. If you pilot something, you can try out a new idea, see if it works. If it works, you're wildly collaborative and innovative. If it doesn't, it was just a pilot, and you can learn from it. So we do a lot of that here in Roanoke. So lastly, number 3, we want to create creative community spaces. So I have to share this one. This is an actual photo from the 1924 at the Roanoke Public Library, right where I'm sitting. And I'm not in the same building. They tore this house down and built a new one. But I love it because I think it shows, well, first off, we would be arrested if we did this. They're sitting on the shelves. But it really shows, though, a community collaboration for a long time. And so, again, if you have that in your community, you want to continue to build on that tradition. So libraries are in competition with a lot of other activities. To be successful, you have to create programs and spaces that become the citizen's third place or community center, however you want to define it. The library can create a place that makes it the go-to neutral place for support to the community, whether it's finding a job, using the internet, taking a class, going to story time, neighborhood festivals, teen centers. But I want to give one quick example here that a way to discuss diverse topics. We have several things that we do on this, but I want to give an example. We're working on a diversity film festival with our local film private independent theater here in Roanoke for February. What we've been doing on that is we have staff that's on the planning program. We're also tying a teen component with the local film series with a film professor from one of our local colleges. So we'll be literally taking the entire student body to the film, to see the film at this theater from the local high school. And so what I'm talking about here is exactly what we were talking about originally, and that is creating these momentum or ability, because what we do is we show the film, and we did this successfully on a voter registration program last year. We show the film, and then we have someone there as a moderator to talk to people about it, and it's been very effective. And we've used our local theater, which has been here for a long time, and it's a nonprofit. We've been using that in the middle of the neighborhood to do that. So again, you don't always have to be at your library to do that. You can reach out into your, again, what I said earlier, your neighborhood. Okay, so lastly, I want to talk just about creating the project. So what you're seeing on the screen right now are our most recent project. Well, the top one on the left is the Melrose Library, where we had our book festival. We start construction on that in January. We're going to move from a 6,000 square foot facility into a 15,000 square foot facility and share services with the Goodwill on jobs and also other activities. The one right below it we just opened 2 weeks ago. That's our Williamson Road branch. And also going on the right side, that's Raleigh Court. We have a slide in our main library, and then again, so you can tell we're in a lot of renovation, which gives us opportunity to create the community spaces our community says they need. So examples, we have, believe it or not, a quiet reading room. Because we're so active, we need to designate a quiet space. We have after-hours access so that the community can use our community rooms. We have interactive play centers, teen centers, and meeting rooms, small group meeting rooms for our Blue Ridge Literacy tutors to come in. We have over 200 tutors that are working in a nonprofit to teach people citizenship classes and language skills. So you can see we're creating the spaces in the library so that we can support that. Also, lastly, our outdoor spaces. This is something new to us. We've been creating outdoor spaces, and what I'm talking about are, you can see all of these here. We have, okay, we need to move. This is our new branch that we just opened. Thank you. Outdoor spaces. So all of these are outdoor spaces at our current libraries. We create spaces where the community can gather. We create spaces where parents can make it as a destination point. So the one up in the far right-hand corner is actually our Peter Pan Park that we developed with our Crillion's Children's Hospital here in Roanoke. It's actually at our library. So parents come to the library, enjoy the library, and then play on the playground. We've had wonderful programs on that patio as well. So creating those outdoor spaces, if you have that in your community, is really important. And being urban, having the fenced areas parents appreciate. So thinking that through as to how you use your space. So I want to conclude by saying that I want to reinforce the 3 ideas, and that's be at the table, work together on a common goal, and create spaces, facilities, and programs that become your community, what your community thinks of first. Be that neutral third place, that community center in your community. And then you can create whatever it is for your community that makes a difference to your citizens. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheila, for sharing all the great work that's happening in Roanoke. And we've got about 10 minutes left to start answering questions. And as I said before, if you have questions, go ahead and type them into the chat as a private message to the host, and we can ask those on the remainder of the webinar. So the first question, both of you talked about serving immigrant populations, and just wanted to hear some more specific programs or strategies that you've heard about, Chris, in your work with Urban Libraries Council, or Sheila, what you all are doing in Roanoke.
I'll give a few snapshots. many libraries offer citizenship classes to help immigrants be prepared to take a citizenship test. They also provide general information about resources. The Harvard Public Library has a New American Center that provides specific programs for immigrants. Another very common program that libraries offer are English as a second language classes, so that they help people learn English as a second language to help them find jobs. So there's a wide variety of activities related to immigrants. I think one of the bottom lines, though, is that sense of being a welcoming place where people can get connected to resources in their community, because they sometimes feel very lost and intimidated when they first come into the community. Immigrants are also are groups that libraries do considerable outreach to, because some may come from places where they're not familiar with the idea of a free public library. So the libraries go out into the neighborhoods and do outreach in places where immigrants meet to introduce them to the resources that might be available at the library.
Hi, I would follow up on that. In our particular case, I'll give a specific example. I mentioned Blue Ridge Literacy. That's basically our regional literacy nonprofit. And actually about 5 years ago, we had a space in our main library when we were getting ready to renovate, and I offered them space. I found out that they were looking for office space, and like most nonprofits, they had a need. So I talked with the city, and we were able to arrange free space for them at our main library, which is in the downtown. Our main library is about 60,000 square feet, so it's our largest branch. And I'm now on their board, and so we are constantly talking about collaborative family programs. But I'll give an example of one. Besides, we have 200 tutors working in our libraries in one-on-one, but we also do the citizenship classes and work with Catholic charities. But we also worked with them a couple summers ago on, we have a local, because we're urban, we had a local group that have a farm and a day camp out in close by. And so we actually worked with the parents, Blue Ridge Literacy, as well as this educational camp to take the children so they could have a camp experience. A couple things that I would say is learning about diversity. So we learned very quickly that we do not use the word camp. A lot of children have been in refugee camps, so we changed the title. We also, in talking with parents and stuff, realized that we know that we have children that are Muslim, and so we actually worked with the camp to accommodate food that they were able to, basically food they were able to eat. And so we were accommodating them. We also found that in order to gain the trust of the parents, we actually did a pre-day. So they all got on the bus with their children and went to this camp about 20 minutes, 30 minutes away, that it was hard for them to find that trust. So once they went to the camp with their children and they had a family day at the camp together at the facility, then we were able to have a successful program. So I think for us, we would love to do much more collaborative programs with parents that are, because it's an adult-based program, we'd like to work with them to do more family-based literacy programs.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Chris about the race and social equity statement, just how you see that moving forward. What are the future plans of using that in the Urban Libraries Council?
That's a good question in the sense that we're still evolving on that. Right now, we started by encouraging libraries to sign on to it. Then our next step is to focus on how it's being operationalized, and that's where ULC will draw on its role as a forum for library leadership, where we will identify and talk with libraries about what they're focusing on and provide examples of success stories. We do have one part of the Innovations Award is around race and social equity. So I mentioned that St. Paul won it last year. This year, Madison Public Library won it for a program they do called Hip Hop Architecture, which is designed to introduce people of color to architecture and how to build communities that represent the culture of that community. So I think a big part of it will be collecting information and sharing information about how libraries are operationalizing it. We also created a working group around race and social equity that drafted the statement, and it's likely that at some point we may reconvene that group to begin looking at how do we go beyond just sharing examples to make sure that this continues to be a value of all public libraries.
Great, thank you. We look forward to seeing that work continue. The next question is, how do your library systems deal with the homeless populations in your community? I know a lot of libraries are starting to put social workers in their facilities. Is that something that you all do or that you've seen happening more nationally?
This is Sheila. We do have homeless individuals that use our libraries. Specifically our main library, we're actually literally across the street from a rescue mission that has 400 beds, and they have a lot of families that are there, hopefully most of the time temporarily, but we actually recognize them because they use a certain kind of stroller that they lend them. So what we found are two things. One is we've created, when we did our renovation of the main library, we did a phase 1 renovation of the main library 2 years ago, and we have a second phase coming up in another couple years. But when we did that, we actually worked with our consultant and also even with our police department to talk about what kind of things we could integrate into our design that would create a safe place. So we did several things. So we used to have an open front porch, and that became a gathering area that people would not want to be near because they would be afraid if people were like asleep or whatever, and we were constantly working with that. So we've turned that into a screened-in porch with our new renovation, and that has worked really well. We also redesigned the way we did our computer area. We redesigned our procedures and our policy about what we wanted and allowed, and we actually have security officers. We have panic buttons at our desk. This is not, I always tell folks that my goal is to create a safe, clean, friendly, family-friendly environment in all our libraries, and that everyone is welcome to use our facility regardless of their station in life or what they're going through, but we have certain rules that we follow. And if you follow those rules, then we will, we're fine. If not, we will enforce our rules. So we've actually had some folks that are homeless tell other people, you need to stop doing that or you will not be able to use the facilities because that's not going to be considered safe for the kids. So we've actually felt like we've had less problems since we've taken that approach. And I believe that I think you want to be in a space where you're viewed with respect because people have all different stories. They can be a veteran, they can be someone that's been sick and they've lost their health insurance, they could have lost their job. We just find some people do have substance abuse and mental health issues. So because of that, we brought in our social service department, and we are planning more training on that so that we recognize that sort of thing. And so I would just say it's a journey, but again, the respect is, it's not those, and I'll just say this is not those people, it's our citizens that all have different walks of life. And we have a lot of people that come to our evening programs, and they are appreciative of it. So it's not all roses all the time, but I believe that we've taken a more direct approach has been better for us.
And this is Chris. I would just piggyback on that. I think Sheila's done a great job of explaining kind of the range of ways libraries are approaching this issue. I think most libraries are trying to be welcoming in the kind of context that Sheila described. And the other significant role that I see evolving even more is connecting homeless people to services that can help them, whether that's health services or social workers or places to live, so that they can create connections, particularly around health services, create connections to help them get beyond where they are right now.
I would like to add to that, too, is we do a lot of job training, And we have had some really good examples where people have come back and told us they got a job. And sometimes we have, again, connected, like you say, people to like even Blue Ridge Literacy because they're working on their GED or they have language issues. So I agree. I mean, we are a resource for that.
Great. Thank you guys so much for answering all of the questions. We've come to the end of the webinar hour, so I just want to say thank you again to both of our presenters, and thank you everyone for being on the webinar. We will be sending the recording and the PowerPoint as a follow-up email, and feel free to share it with your networks. And thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.